Hello and welcome students back to the next level in our AS Human Geography course. Today we will be looking at the demographic transition model. Okay, so the demographic transition model is also shortened to the DTM, and what it is, it's basically a model that shows how population changes over time as the birth and death rate change as a country develops through these 5 stages. So I'm going to talk you through how this model works. So first of all, we have two axes. We have our x-axis, which shows time, and then our y-axis, which shows the birth and death rates per year per thousand of a population. So the birth rate is drawn in green, the death rate in red, and then we also have the total population in yellow. So beginning at the first stage, this starting point in stage 1 is meant to be how the beginning of development of a kind of nation. And now, because of the world we live in, there aren't many countries, well, technically none at all, that are in stage 1, but for the purpose of an example, we can give it as an Amazonian tribe, which aren't really developed at all. So we can see that the birth and death rate are quite high, and they are fluctuating because people die and are born at the same rate, but then there's certain reasons such as famine or perhaps some sort of tribal war that cause the death rate and the birth rate to spike over time. So this is called the high fluctuating zone. Then as the country develops over into stage 2, and later in the video we will be looking at what makes a country develop from stage to stage. And in stage 2 it is called the early expansion, and this is because, as you can see, the death rate drops significantly. There is a very steep decrease to the death rate, and the birth rate does decrease as well, but not as much. So this is what is called natural increase, and then we can see from the total population there is a very steep increase in the population because of the drop in the death rate. Then moving on to stage 3, the birth rate then begins to catch up with the death rate. However, the incline isn't as steep, so it doesn't quite reach it on time. But as you can see, it does. Technically, the population is still growing, but the rate has been reduced from stage 2. Then in stage 4, the birth rate just plays catch up. Really, at the end, it may be in level with the death rate. You don't really have to be that precise, but the death rate and birth rate begin to fluctuate again. We will look at the reasons why later in the video. And in the end, in the decline of stage 5, the death rate eclipses the birth rate, hence causing the population to decrease. So this is an important model. Everything on this model is what you're going to need to know for the exams. I would copy this down on another sheet and take note. And once you have done that, we can move on to the factors that impact growth. So there's a number of factors that will make a country develop over time, and as the country becomes more developed, the different factors will be varied. So what happens when a country goes from stage 1 to stage 2? Now, in order to develop, the death rate is going to decrease a lot, and this is because of better nutrition, better sanitation, better healthcare, and better transport and transport links. So what this means is that because less people dying from malnutrition and diseases, because there's now sanitation and healthcare, the people's death rate is decreasing quite a lot, and better transport and transport links mean that it's easier to move food in and out of the country. So as a result, more people are receiving the nourishments which they need, which makes them become a stage 2 country once the death rate increases drastically. Okay, now moving on to a stage 3 country. So now we are going from an early expansion to a late expansion, and this happens because there's more education on contraception. So as a result, the birth rate drops because less people are being born since more people are using contraception. So as a result, family sizes decrease. So for example, in Indonesia and Taiwan, where they used to have families that had 7 kids or some number similar to that figure, after they had the education on contraception, the size of those families greatly decreased to now about 2 or 3. So as a result, the birth rate dropped significantly, and it's still higher than the death rate, but it's still sort of playing catch up. Also, there's stricter laws on child labour. So previously in these countries, children were born to be seen as producers so that they can help work on farms or factories, but since there's stricter laws in child labour in more developed countries, families can't do this anymore, so as a result they don't see the point in having the children if there's no economic benefit, so as a result they don't have them in the first place, hence lowering the birth rate. Also, the cost of living is much higher, so there's going to be tons of families that can't afford to continue having the 7 children which they're having, because now in the more developed world they have to pay for healthcare and far more food, and everything is getting more expensive. So the family just want to have smaller size, much fewer children. The family should be of a smaller size. Okay, now stage 3 to stage 4. We're moving from the late expansion to a low fluctuating zone, and this is basically because stage 4 is in transition, moving from stage 3 to stage 5. In stage 3, the birth rate is higher, but in stage 5 it is lower. So as a result, there's going to be fluctuations. So in order to know why these fluctuations occur, we have to compare it to what happens in stage 3 and stage 5. So we've just looked at how a country develops from stage 3 to stage 4. From stage 2 to stage 3, and this is the difference which is going to make stage 4 fluctuate. So the reason there is a decrease in birth rate and an increase in the death rate, hence making the population decline, is because there's an increase in the availability of same-sex relationships. So, as being gay is now accepted in these more developed countries, they are not going to be able to have children of their own. Instead, the couples that are gay will have to adopt. So, as a result, the birth rate is going to decrease, and also women have more opportunities, so they put work over having a family. As a result, the birth rate decreases, and because there are more women and, let's say, gay couples that are dying without having children, the replacement level decreases, and as a result, the death rate eclipses the birth rate. Also, one of the main reasons that the death rate increases is because there are a lot of lifestyle changes which cause more early deaths, such as the effect of smoking and obesity on the population. So those are the reasons why. So before we move on to the strengths and weaknesses of the demographic transition model, stage 4 is a combination of all the reasons why the birth rate increases and also decreases increases in stage 5 and decreases in stage 3. Okay, so the strengths of the DTM. One of the strengths is that it can be applied to all countries, so you can compare and contrast all these countries, mapping them onto this demographic transition model, because it should be that all countries move at a similar rate, because this model was based off the UK, and it assumes that all these countries are going to follow the same pattern. Also, it is easy to understand, which isn't one of the main strengths. It technically is right, but it would be much easier if you were to learn the other 3. And the final one being that it provides a starting point to study demographic change. So we can take a look at stage 1 and stage 2 countries and then be able to predict what's going to happen to them in the future as they develop. So stage 2 countries such as Cambodia, we're going to know that they are then going to have a late expansion where the birth rate drops significantly but the death rate is still lower. Then it will have a low fluctuation point in the 4th stage and a decline in the 5th stage as it develops. Okay, now here are some of the weaknesses. Firstly, it assumes that all countries follow development accordingly, as the model is based on the UK, but as we all know, this is not true, because different countries will develop at different rates. Not all cultures are the same as the UK's. For example, Mexico, where Catholicism has a really big influence on the population, as they develop, many would presume that the birth rate isn't going to decrease a lot in stage 3, and instead it may remain constant, but the death rate may begin to decrease as well. And this is because Catholicism teaches families that it's good to have many children. So for that reason, the DTM of Mexico isn't going to look anything the same as that of the UK. Also, it doesn't work for non-industrialized countries. So countries which haven't hit their industrialized revolution won't be able to be mapped onto the DTM, as they're not going to have all these developmental milestones up until the point of stage 1, 2, or 3. And this is a main problem with the DTM, the main thing that it's been criticized for, and that is that it doesn't include migration rates. So the DTM only shows natural changes in the birth rate and the death rate, but it doesn't account for the influx of migrants or emigrants in a country. So the total population line is going to be very different if we were to add in migration as well. So that's one of the main problems with the DTM. And also it doesn't take into consideration government intervention. So, for example, the China's one-child policy, the birth rate was, incredibly low in China, and that didn't reflect what it should have been on the DTM. But the fact is, because the government made Chinese people they kind of forced them only to have one child, then their population is going to look a lot different to any other country that was going to work on the DTM. So, because China's birth rate is very low and their death rate, as a result, is probably higher, you could put them as a stage 5 country, but they're not there, technically, as of now. So that's one of the weaknesses of the DTM, that government intervention can kind of mask where a sort of country should belong on it. But even if it does say that China's birth rate is lower than its death rate, which it isn't now, but let's say if it were to be in the long term, it may not mean necessarily that they are a stage 5 country. And finally, some countries receive help when developing. So the UK didn't receive that much help when developing, seeing as they were one of the most developed nations at the time before the Industrial Revolution. However, now, because of globalization and the existence of the United Nations, countries will receive help in developing, which means they may not follow the same path as the UK did on the DTM. Okay, so we've reached the end of all our note-taking and learning. Here are our questions. What I would like you to do now is pause the video when you are ready, attempt these on a separate piece of paper, try and hide your notes so that you don't end up just copying on the sheet of paper, and once you're done, hit play to check out the answers. Okay, so here are the answers. If you did get all 5 correct, well, with 3, 4, and 5, you did get the examples correct. Give yourself a pat on the back and move on to the next video, or if not, I would advise you to rewind the video and check where you went wrong, or just reread your notes once more and attempt the questions you got wrong again. So this has been the end of the lesson. Next lesson we will be looking at population structures. Also, if you are looking to do some other revision on your other subjects, check out the channel, as there may be more videos to help you revise for those subjects. Okay, well, until then, I'll see you next time.